Thank you all for inviting me. Thank you. I got here yesterday. Nancy and Miriam and Karen gave me a grand tour of Ulm. It was much better than I even could ever imagine. It's such a beautiful town. So I want to thank you all for welcoming me here. I really appreciate it. I should start off by saying I am the least likely person to write a book about Albert Einstein. I did not do well in science. I failed science in high school, so I like to call myself a likable idiot. I knew as much about Albert Einstein as probably just, the average person. He won the Nobel Prize, the theory of relativity, that wild shock of white hair that looks like he stuck his finger in an electrical socket. That's basically all I knew about Albert Einstein. Before I start, so I live in West Virginia, which is not New York City, and we have chickens, and this is one of our chickens. Do you know what we named this chicken? Albert. Yeah, it's Albert Einstein, our chicken. So as I said, I did not know much about Albert Einstein when I was growing up. Like I said, I'm not a scientist. But there was one story that got me very interested in Albert Einstein, and I want to share that story with you this morning. And I'm going to talk today. There's basically going to be two sections to my talk. The first part, I'm going to talk about Einstein's head. And the second part, I'm going to talk about Einstein's heart. So Einstein's head and Einstein's heart. And so the first story literally has to do with Einstein's head. And it begins on April 18th, 1955. And that is the day that Albert Einstein died. And so Albert Einstein was in Princeton Hospital. He died in the middle of the night. And in the morning, they called Dr. Thomas Harvey in to perform the autopsy. This is Dr. Thomas Harvey. He's a pathologist. He performs autopsies, and he was on call that morning, and he came to perform the autopsy on Albert Einstein. And so he's going through the autopsy, and he's taking out all the pieces of Einstein, and then at the end, and he discovers something happened in his stomach, and that's why he died. And at the end, when nobody was looking, he took a saw, cracked open Einstein's skull, reached inside, and grabbed the brain. This is a true story. This man stole Albert Einstein's brain. I'm not making this up. This is a true story. I like to call it the greatest heist of the 20th century. And not that many people know about it, that he stole the brain. And then he goes outside, and he gives a press conference because all the reporters were standing outside the hospital asking about how did Dr. Einstein die. And he tells them it was something in the stomach, and he does not tell anybody that he stole the brain. Okay, can anyone guess why did he steal the brain? What? To do research. Yeah, he's like, as we all know, Einstein is one of the most famous, scientists to ever live. We think of genius, we think of Albert Einstein. He's like, here I am, face to face, right with Einstein's brain. It would be a shame not to take the brain and do research on it and to see if we can learn something about genius from Albert Einstein's brain. So that's why he took the brain. He didn't get the family's permission. Like I said, he didn't tell anybody, and he took the brain. And he brought it home, and he put it in a jar in the living room above the fireplace. And that is where Albert Einstein's brain lived for many years, until one day his wife said to him, honey, it's kind of grossing out the children. Can you move it? And so he took it, and he put Albert Einstein's brain in a beer cooler in the basement of his house. And this is where Einstein's brain lived for decades. In the 50s, and the 60s, and the 70s, and the 80s. It was in this guy's basement in a cooler. Lost to history. Now, I said he wanted to do research on the brain. The problem is he is not a brain researcher. He does autopsies for a living. As a matter of fact, he's not even a great pathologist. Soon after this incident, he was fired from the hospital because he was having an affair with a nurse. So anyway, and the rest of his life, he had trouble finding work. At the end of his life, he ended up working in a paint factory. But in any event, so he doesn't know how to research brains. So what he would do, and this is the days before the internet, he would, anytime he would be traveling, he would look up in the phone book local brain researchers, maybe like at a local university, and he'd write down their name and address, and when he got back home, he would go to his jar, open the jar, cut a little piece of the brain, maybe like the size of a little biscuit or something, and he would put it in the mail, in the regular mail, and mail it to these researchers all over the world. So there are pieces of Einstein's brain across the globe, Tokyo, Buenos Aires, Honolulu. There's pieces of the brain. If you ever come to America, if you're ever in Philadelphia, there's a museum in Philadelphia called the Mutter Museum in downtown Philadelphia, and you could actually see a piece of Albert Einstein's brain. One of the doctors who received a piece, she lived in Philadelphia, and when she retired, she donated her piece to this museum, and you could actually go today and see it's very small piece of his brain. One time he sent some pieces in a mayonnaise jar, and they got lost in the mail. And so after that, he started using Federal Express or DHL so that he could, keep track where the brain was. We were talking about this yesterday. Einstein's brain was not the only thing stolen that day. Einstein's eye doctor was in the hospital, and when he found out that Einstein, his famous patient, was downstairs in the morgue, he quickly ran downstairs and took Einstein's eyeballs. And so those eyeballs are now in a safety deposit box at a bank in New Jersey. His granddaughter owns them. At one point in the 1990s, Michael Jackson, the singer, wanted to buy the eyeballs for $5 million, and the granddaughter said no. Okay. So, I'm listening to this story of Einstein's brain. I was reading about the story of Einstein's brain, and I thought to myself, not one teacher, when I was growing up in elementary school and high school, and I learned about Albert Einstein, not one teacher told me the story about the brain. And I was thinking to myself, there must be so much more about Albert Einstein that I don't know. Obviously there's a lot. I don't know anything about theoretical physics. But there must be other things about Einstein that I don't know. And so I decided I wanted to go and find out all the interesting things about Einstein the man. And so, as Nancy mentioned, I am a journalist. I work for a newspaper called The Forward. It's the oldest Jewish newspaper in America. It started in 1897. It covered everything from the sinking of the Titanic to the current war in Israel. And it used to be a Yiddish newspaper when it first started. Anyway, so I decided I was going to write a lot of articles about Einstein for our newspaper. And so I looked on Google every morning to see if Einstein was in the news. And to my surprise, I would see about 8 or 10 Einstein stories every single day. A lot of it is science related. A lot of modern day current scientists are doing research in something to do with Einstein's theories. As a matter of fact, this past week was the Nobel Prizes. In the last 25 years, so since the year 2000, 5 of the Nobel Prizes in physics have been awarded to scientists doing research in Einstein's theories. So in the scientific community, Einstein is still very relevant. But I also started discovering other articles about Einstein every day. For example, I started discovering there's a large Einstein memorabilia market. People love to collect things that are somehow connected to Albert Einstein. So Albert Einstein famously smoked a pipe, and he had a pipe in every single room in his house. And every once in a while, one of his pipes goes up for auction. And recently, one of his pipes went up for auction, and guess how much it sold for? $500,000. It sold for over $1 million US. Yeah, one of Einstein's pipes. So that's one thing. By the way, I meant to show this here. Hold on. This is, you might understand, this is Yiddish. This is a Yiddish newspaper. My newspaper interviewed Einstein's mother, and they asked Einstein's mother, did you think Einstein would grow up to be such a great man? And she said, I thought Einstein would be gornished. Gornish is the Yiddish word for zilch or nothing. So, and that's the headline. Albert Einstein, mama, something, something gornished. So even Einstein's mother didn't think he would grow up to be, to grow up to be much. So as I said, so going back to the memorabilia market. Einstein famously wore this leather Levi's jacket. He used to love wearing this leather Levi's jacket, and a few years ago, this jacket went up for auction. And guess who bought the jacket? Levi's. Levi's has a museum, and they wanted Einstein's jacket for the museum. And they said, this is the curator of the museum, that's the jacket. She said when she opened the box and lifted the jacket out, it still smelled from all the tobacco smoke from Albert Einstein. So I met a man in Connecticut who has the Guinness World Record for the largest collection of celebrity hair. He collects celebrity hair, and he claims to have hair from the night Abraham Lincoln was shot. He has some of astronaut Neil Armstrong's hair, and that he bought from Neil Armstrong's barber, and Neil Armstrong was very upset and sued him. And he also claims to have some of Einstein's hair. I went to his house, and he showed me a Ziploc bag full of white hair, and he says, this is Einstein's hair. It just goes to show you that there are people who are not scientists who are obsessed with Albert Einstein. So I started writing all of these articles, quirky, funny articles about Albert Einstein, about his brain, about the hair. And one day I get a phone call from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where the Albert Einstein archives are, very serious people. And they called me on the phone from Israel, and I got nervous. Why are they calling me? Maybe they're mad because I'm writing all of these silly articles. And they said something to me very interesting. Requires a little bit of a backstory. They said, you know, when social media first started, what has it been, 20 years now? When social media started 20 years ago, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, they reserved pages for famous dead people. They didn't want some, just John Doe, some guy in his basement to take the Elvis Presley page and just start posting on Elvis Presley's page. And so they reserved those pages, and they gave those pages to the estates of those famous dead people. And so they had a page for Albert Einstein on Facebook, the official Albert Einstein page on Facebook, and they had an official Albert Einstein page on Twitter and Instagram. And they gave those pages to the Albert Einstein archives at Hebrew University so that they could do whatever they want to do on those pages. And so the archives calls me up and says, we're busy doing real science work. We don't have time to post on Einstein's social media. But you seem to know a lot of fun facts about Albert Einstein. Do you want to be Albert Einstein on social media? That's what they asked me. And so I said, sure, that sounds like a fun side job. I never thought, when I was in journalism school that I would be a dead celebrity. And so since 2017, I am Albert Einstein. So when you see Einstein post, that's actually me posting. Sometimes I get kids from India will message me for help with their science homework. And little do they know, some short Jewish guy from West Virginia is pretending to be a Nobel Prize winner. But I post... Albert Einstein is the most active dead celebrity on social media. Marilyn Monroe occasionally offers fashion advice. John Wayne doesn't have much to say on Twitter. But as Albert Einstein, I post probably 8 times a day. I post a lot. So he is by far the most active dead celebrity, and he has the most fans of any dead celebrity. Einstein has more than 23 million fans. To compare, Einstein has more fans than the Rolling Stones, than Tom Hanks. So, imagine this guy, as Matthias was saying, he died, 70 years ago this year. And he's still very active in people's minds. Let's look at the time here. Okay. I'll tell you one quick funny story. Okay, I'll tell you one quick funny story. So people love quoting Albert Einstein on social media. He has a lot of famous quotes. This is a real quote from Ivanka Trump. She posted this quote about Albert Einstein, and I saw it, and I was like, that's not a real Einstein quote. That is not a real quote. So I commented on the quote as Albert Einstein. I said, Ivanka, I never said that. And it made international news. This is something I think from England. And then here were some more headlines. I didn't realize that my comment would draw international attention, but it did. And then other people started making fun of Ivanka by doing other famous quotes. Okay, so what do I post to Albert Einstein's social media? So there are a lot of things. I post a lot of what I've just been discussing with you, some news articles about Einstein, interesting stories about Einstein. There are some regular features that I post. So for example, every Thursday I do something called Throwback Thursday, where I show an old photograph of Albert Einstein. The archives has given me hundreds of photos of Albert Einstein, many of which have never been seen before. And so every Thursday I do something called Throwback Thursday. This is Einstein and his wife Elsa at the White House. I think that's President Harding next to him. This is Einstein. Can anyone guess where in the United States this is? In New York, but more specifically? Close, not the Empire State Building, close. Rockefeller. I love that suit he's wearing. This is Einstein on top of Rockefeller Center in Manhattan. So that's another photo I shared recently. Obviously Einstein has lots of famous quotations, Ivanka Trump aside. A lot of them are inspirational quotations. People have it on a coffee mug, on a t-shirt. And so every Wednesday I do something called Wednesday Wisdom, where I share a famous quote from Albert Einstein. And then we get a lot of artwork too. Some of these 23 million fans will submit art that they have made of Albert Einstein. And so every Friday I do something called Fan Art Friday, where I'll share a piece of Einstein art. Nowadays people are sending me AI art of Einstein. Just a funny side story. Since I've been doing Albert Einstein, other dead celebrities have contacted me, and I now also do social media for these dead celebrities. So now I do 4 dead celebrities. I have to be very careful when I'm posting on my phone and a picture of my dogs or my chickens that I don't post it to Maya Angelou's account. It's Okay, so then the question is, why is Einstein so famous? Why does Einstein have 23 million fans, right? Shakespeare doesn't have 23 million fans. Why is Einstein so famous? We could talk for hours about that. I'll just spend a few minutes about my theory why I think he's so famous. So Einstein came about at a time in modern history when all of modern media was in place. You had radio, photographs, newspapers, television, magazines. That was all around during Einstein's day. And Einstein really knew, how to play to the camera. He was a very jovial guy. And if you saw the movie Oppenheimer a few years ago, what did I just do? If you saw the movie Oppenheimer a few years ago that won the Oscar, this is Einstein and Oppenheimer in Princeton. Oppenheimer in that movie was very serious, right? He was always wearing a suit, always had that hat. Very serious guy, didn't like to joke around. Einstein was the exact opposite. Einstein loved to joke around. Einstein didn't like to get dressed up. There were stories, he had holes in his sweater. He never liked to wear socks. He used to walk around. We saw a picture yesterday. He used to walk around in his bathrobe. And kids could walk up to him on the street. Dr. Einstein, I need help with my science homework. And he would invite them over and help them with their science homework. He was a very approachable guy. When he would write a new scientific paper, Macy's in Manhattan, the department store, they have their windows with the latest fashion. And whenever Einstein would write a new paper, Macy's would make a copy and put it in the front window of Macy's as if it was the announcement of a royal baby or something, So, he was the most famous person on the planet, especially after he won the Nobel Prize. Einstein was friends with Charlie Chaplin. That's Einstein, Charlie Chaplin, and Elsa Einstein. And Charlie Chaplin once invited Einstein to a Hollywood red carpet premiere. And on the red carpet, all the journalists ignored Chaplin and just wanted to interview Einstein. Even though they could barely understand anything he was saying with his thick German accent, they were more interested in Einstein. Einstein and Elsa went to Japan for a visit, and they checked into their hotel in Japan, and they walk out onto the balcony, and there's throngs of people on the sidewalk, tens of thousands of people just looking up at Einstein like he's a rock star, he transcended so many communities outside of science. When Einstein, there's a lot of photographs of Einstein taking his hat and throwing it in the air, because he knew that he was always chased by the paparazzi and the photographers. He knew that would make a great photo for the next morning's newspaper. It's very fun, throwing the hat in the air. You never see a picture of Marie Curie throwing her hat in the air, right? That was an Einstein thing. So one of the things I like to share with Einstein's 23 million fans is how relevant he is to their daily lives. So, there's a lot of technology that we use today that comes courtesy of Albert Einstein. If I say Alexander Graham Bell, you would say telephone. But if I say Einstein, it's much harder to think of a piece of technology, consumer technology that we use today. But there's lots of things that we have today that we would not have if it wasn't for Albert Einstein. So my favorite example of this is GPS. Many of you use GPS to get here today, the global positioning system. I'm not going to get into the science. We have scientists for that. But the science behind GPS would not work without Einstein's theory of relativity, because we're talking about 3 different points: the satellite in space, you and your car is moving, the satellite's moving, the Earth is spinning. Einstein's theory of relativity was an elegant mathematical equation that made all 3 of those points able to figure out where they are in relation to each other. And so think about that the next time you have a delivery come to your house. The pizza delivery comes to your house. The pizza delivery guy found your house because of Albert Einstein. Right? You have Albert Einstein to thank for that. What has Galileo done for you today? Nothing, right? So GPS is something I like to tell people about. If you Google who invented GPS, 2 names will pop up: Albert Einstein and a woman named Gladys West. Did you see the movie Hidden Figures? Came out maybe 8 years ago. Yeah, and a book too, about these women, mostly African-American women, who worked for NASA in the 1960s. They were called human computers. They were helping the engineers. Gladys Mae West was one of those hidden figures. She worked for the US Navy in the early 1960s. They had just sent a satellite into space, and they couldn't figure out the distance of the satellite. And she was the first person to realize you could take Einstein's theory of relativity and apply it to satellites, the distance to the satellite in space. So she and Albert Einstein are credited with inventing GPS. I called her on the phone and spoke to her for my book, The Einstein Effect, which is available for purchase outside today. And I spoke to her, I interviewed her on the phone. She's in her 90s. And she goes, Benyamin, I don't even use GPS. I like the old-fashioned maps that you would fold up and put in the glove compartment. Other technology, Einstein won the Nobel Prize for the photoelectric effect. We can talk about this afterwards when the scientists join me on stage. But there's a lot of technology that we have today that comes courtesy of the photoelectric effect. Remote controls use the photoelectric effect. When you go to a grocery store and the doors open up automatically, that's the photoelectric effect. When you scan items at the grocery checkout store and the laser reads your barcode, there's so much what we do has the photoelectric effect in it. And so we have all of that thanks to Albert Einstein. So I said to you, we're going to talk about 2 parts today: Einstein's head and Einstein's heart. So we've talked about Einstein's head. Literally, we talked about the brain that was in his head, and we talked about some of the ideas that came from Einstein's head. Now I'm going to pivot and talk about Einstein's heart. And when I say Einstein's heart, don't worry, to my knowledge, nobody stole Einstein's heart. When I say Einstein's heart, I mean Einstein's humanness, his humanitarianness. He was, as we say in Yiddish, he was a mensch. This is a picture of Einstein in Berlin in the early 1930s. And at the time, he was the most famous Jew in all of Germany. And the Nazis did not like Einstein, they put a $5,000 bounty on his head, and there were at least two assassination attempts on Einstein in Berlin. And by 1933, he decided to leave Germany, and he immigrated to the United States, him and his wife and his stepdaughter, in October 1933. And one of the things that he did when he got to America was he wanted to help rescue his fellow German Jews from the rise of the Nazis, and he created an organization called the International Rescue Committee. And he started this in 1933, and the purpose at the time was to help German Jewish refugees get out of Germany, and they were able to help some, but obviously not enough. And the interesting thing is this organization is still around today. He created this, and this is again showing the lasting impact of Albert Einstein outside the scientific community. This is one of the largest refugee aid organizations operating around the world today. So if you recall in February 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, and we were reading in the newspaper about all the Ukrainian refugees who had fled the country, this group was one of the groups that was helping Ukrainian refugees leave the country. I interviewed for my book this Ukrainian woman, and she was rescued thanks to Albert Einstein's group, and she told me I would not be alive today if it wasn't for Albert Einstein. Right, so here's a guy that's been dead since 1955, and he's still helping save people's lives. She called Einstein an instrument of God, is what she called him. Now, this organization is a big organization. They need a celebrity spokesperson. They obviously can't use Albert Einstein because Einstein's dead. So they have actor Mandy Patinkin. He's their celebrity spokesperson. He's an activist. He's an actor and an activist. You may know him from Homeland, which had a season in Berlin, I think. They filmed the season in Berlin. Princess Bride, he was in. Anyway, but his cause is helping refugees, and he has been the spokesperson for Einstein's group for nearly a decade. And he travels the world, to refugee zones and helping people flee. And I had the wonderful opportunity to interview him for my book, and he told me all about, there's a chapter in the book about how Einstein inspired him to become an activist. And we did an event together after the book came out in New York. He's holding up some eggs. I brought him some eggs for my chickens. But he and I were on stage in Manhattan giving a talk about how Einstein's humanitarian work with the International Rescue Committee. And my whole family was there. I come from a family of rabbis. My dad's rabbi, my brothers are all rabbis, my sister married rabbis. That's the topic of my first book, in case anyone's interested, my Jesus year. So two of my rabbinic brothers were there, and I introduced them to Mandy backstage, and I should not have let them be alone with Mandy for a few minutes, because when I came back, one of my rabbinic brothers was asking Mandy for a donation, and my other rabbinic brother was asking Mandy to join his synagogue. But helping refugees was not the only humanitarian cause that Einstein was involved in. Einstein was very much involved in the United States in the civil rights movement. He's giving a lecture here at Lincoln University, which was the first school in America to offer college degrees to black students. Einstein spoke at the 1946 graduation ceremony, commencement address at this school, and he said, "I will not stand idly by and watch this happen." And so he went around the country giving talks about the civil rights with the NAACP. There was a black student at Princeton who could not afford tuition. He paid for that student's tuition. One of my favorite stories about Einstein and the civil rights movement has to do with Marian Anderson. Marian Anderson is a famous African-American opera singer. And as we know from last night, Einstein loved music, and he was a big fan of Marian Anderson's. And Marian Anderson came to Princeton to perform a concert, and Einstein went to the concert, and they were talking backstage, and they were having such a great conversation. She's like, "Walk with me, I'm walking to my hotel." And so they walked from the theater to the hotel. They go to the hotel to check in. It was called the NASA Inn. It's still there. And she goes to check in, and they say, "It's a whites-only hotel. You cannot stay here." And Einstein couldn't believe it. He's like, So Einstein said, come stay at my house. And so Einstein and her walked to Einstein's house. It's about a mile away. Einstein, he invented GPS. He never got his driver's license. He was horrible with directions, but so he walked a lot of places, especially around Princeton. So they walked back to his house, and they became lifelong friends, Einstein and Marian Anderson. And a few years ago, somebody wrote a play about their friendship. I think it's called Oh, What a Night. And it travels around. So maybe, I don't know if it'll come to Germany, but this is a picture of one of the performances about that. And as Matthias said, another thing that Einstein was involved with was speaking out against war. Einstein never served as a soldier when he was young, and he called himself a militant pacifist. He hated war. He never understood why countries went to war. And so right shortly before he died, he got together with his friend, a British philosopher, Bertrand Russell, and they wrote the Russell-Einstein Manifesto, thank you, 1955. And in it, they wrote, we are not of this nation or that nation, we are all human beings. And so he wrote that a few weeks before he died, and he always spoke out against war. And so it is perhaps no surprise that at the end of the 20th century, when Time magazine wanted to find a person of the century, of the 1900s, they had a lot to choose from. JFK, MLK, Gandhi, Princess Diana, the Beatles. They chose Albert Einstein as the person of the century. And yes, it's because he was a great scientist, but also because he was a great humanitarian as well. I have a few minutes left, and I just want to tell you one more story. So we started today talking about the man who stole Einstein's brain. And you're probably all wondering what happened to the brain and everything. So I just want to finish that story for all of you. So here is a picture. Oh, by the way, here's a picture of Einstein wearing his wife's sandals. He hated there was a great story. Einstein was once having friends for dinner, and Einstein's wife said, Albert, get ready. We're having friends for dinner. Get dressed. And he said, listen, if my friends want to come and see me, they'll see me. If they want to see my clothes, I'll show them where the closet is. So he never, I thought, are you doing that? You were not wearing socks today. I thought that was in honor of Einstein. But anyway, so getting back to the brain. This is a picture in the 1990s. This is mid-1990s. This is the guy, and he's cut up the brain so much it's in different jars. And it's the mid-1990s. Now people have discovered him. There's been newspaper articles about him in the Wall Street Journal. Different news. Newsweek had a big article about him. And so now people know he has the brain. He's getting old. He's in his 80s. And he decides to return the brain to Einstein's granddaughter, Evelyn, in San Francisco. And so he gets in his car, puts the brain in the trunk, and drives from New Jersey across the country to California. Gets to lunch. He has lunch with Evelyn Einstein. He leaves the brain in the trunk. They seem to be having a nice lunch. In the middle of the meal, she gets up to use the restroom. And he gets scared. He's like, you know what? I changed my mind. And he runs out of the restaurant, gets in the car, and drives all the way back to New Jersey with the brain. So he never gave her the brain back. Okay, so fast forward to 2007. 2007 is relatively recently, and we were all around in 2007. In 2007, he's in his 90s. He's about to die. And he realizes he's got to do something with the brain. So he packs up the brain in these 3 jars in a cardboard box, and he brings them to a younger doctor who he's friends with in Princeton. I say younger, he was in his 50s, now he's in his 70s today, this younger doctor. And he brings the box to his office and says, it's your problem now. And he leaves, and then he dies. And so now the younger doctor, who's, again, he's in his 70s now, so he's not, young, and he's not as young anymore. He doesn't want anyone to know who he is. He doesn't want people knocking at his door, bothering him. So he is anonymous. It's very hard to find out who he is. If you look him up on Google, you'll see he likes to go by Dr. X. Dr. X. And so he's very hard to find because he doesn't want people to know, because he saw what happened to this guy once people found out. So I'm writing a book about Einstein. I have a chapter about the brain in my book, and I'm a journalist. I figured I could find Dr. X, and I was able to find Dr. X, and I emailed him, and I called him, and I said, I want to interview you. I want to see the brain. No, I don't want any publicity. 2 years I was writing the book, writing him. He said no. Finally, A week before I had to turn the manuscript to the publisher, he calls me up and he goes, fine, you can come to Princeton and I'll show you the brain. I live in a 7-hour drive from Princeton. So I get in my car, I drive to Princeton, I check into the NASA Inn, the same hotel that wouldn't let Marian Anderson stay there. And I go to the parking lot, and this guy's in the parking lot. He pops open the trunk of his car, and in the trunk of his car is the cardboard box with these 3 jars of Albert Einstein's brain. And he lets me I held that small jar in my hand. And, it's amazing. Everything that we always meet people. You have 7 degrees of separation. I know someone who went to school with Einstein. Here I am, there's 0 degrees of separation. I'm holding the last physical part of Albert Einstein. And I thought to myself, and with this I'll close, if I could spend a few minutes with Einstein in the afterlife, in heaven, if I could have a conversation with Einstein, what would I want to talk to him about? And we said today Einstein is very famous for his quotations, and I would want to talk to Einstein about my favorite Einstein quotation, and that is this: I have no special talent, I am only passionately curious. Look at that first sentence, I have no special talent. Albert Einstein, of all people, has every right to say that he has special talent. But he was, so humble. What did his mother call him? Gornished, right? I'm nothing. Einstein was such a humble person. Imagine if in today's society, if the politicians and the tech leaders, everyone who thinks they're so high and mighty, if they had just a little bit of Einstein's humility, how much better the world would be. And then the second sentence is, I am only passionately curious. We talked a lot today about how Einstein is a humanitarian. And what does it mean to be a humanitarian? It means to care about other people, to be curious about other people. So when you meet somebody, in the plaza today, you could walk up to them and say, let me tell you about me. Here's what I did, me. Or you could say, tell me about you. I want to learn your story. I want to hear about your struggles. So Einstein was always very curious. And so, and with this I'll close, the 2 biggest lessons I've learned from Albert Einstein, being Albert Einstein on social media and reading about him so much, is number 1, to have bold humility, and number 2, to always be passionately curious. And so I'll stop talking, and then we can have the panel get up here. I think I made it on time. Okay.